we're going to review our order of operations. So when we're thinking about our order of operations, remember the acronym PEMDAS. We always want to do our parentheses first, then we can look for exponents and radicals. We multiply and divide after that. Remember, if a problem has more than one multiplication or division, we go from left to right. So if our problem said 4 divided by 2 times 6, we would do 4 divided by 2 first, and then we would multiply by 6, because that's the order it's in. Add and subtract is the same. Add and subtract is the last thing you do, but when we're looking at a problem that has more than one operation, we would go from left to right. So I would do 4 minus 6 is negative 2, and then negative 2 plus 2 is 0. We also want to think about our order of operations works with fractions. So when we're thinking about our fractions, we actually want to think about the numerator and the denominator separately. We want to make sure everything in the numerator is simplified using our order of operations. We want to make sure everything in our denominator is simplified. And then, once we have a number over a number, we can divide. So let's do a few practice problems to refresh our memories. So if we look at number 2, we've got negative 4 squared. Remember that this means we are taking negative 4 times itself. Now I know this is going to be a positive answer because I know that a negative times a negative is positive. So since 4 times 4 is 16, the negative 4 squared is 16. Let's jump to a different one. Number 8, if we had something like negative 2 squared minus 4 times 3 times negative 1, we have to think about our order of operations. So I'm going to think about my parentheses and exponents first. So I'm going to do negative 2 squared. Remember, a negative times a negative is going to make this a positive 4. And that's why the parentheses are around the negative 2. So you know that it's negative 2 times negative 2, as opposed to a negative 2 times a positive 2. Well then, if we want to subtract 4 times 3 times negative 1, we have to multiply this out before we can actually subtract that. So I'm going to think about this as negative 4 times 3, which would give me negative 12, and negative 12 times 1 would give us positive 12. So this is actually going to become 4 plus 12, which then leaves us with 16 as our final answer. So we're always thinking about our order of operations. What do we have to do first? What would come next? If we have something like number 14, where we have 7 plus or minus the square root of 16, well, remember, I can't add 7 in the square root of 16 because 7 is an integer and our square root of 16 is under that radical. We have to evaluate that before we can figure this out. We know that the square root of 16 is 4, so I could rewrite this as 7 plus or minus 4. And now I'm actually going to have two different answers. I have to figure out what 7 plus 4 is, which would give us 11 as one of our answers. And I have to figure out 7 minus 4, which would give us 3. So 11 and 3 are both our answers for this problem. That's what the plus or minus means. It means we have one answer from when we add and one answer from when we subtract. Let's take a look at number 17. So number 17, we've got a fraction. So like we said, we want to do the numerator first and then simplify the denominator, and then we can see if we can divide these. Because recall that fractions are just asking you to divide the numerator and denominator. Well, if I just think about negative 6 minus the square root of 100, I know that the square root of 100 is 10. So I could rewrite this as negative 6 minus 10. And I know that negative 6 minus 10 is negative 16. So my numerator is negative 16. Well, now I'm going to think about the denominator. It just says 2 times negative 1. Okay, 2 times negative 1 is negative 2. So now that we have negative 16 divided by negative 2, we can figure that out, and it would leave us with 8. So when you've got the fractions, you have to simplify everything in your numerator with your order of operations and everything in your denominator. And once you have that figured out and you've got your number divided by your number, then you can find your final answer. What about if we had something, multiple operations underneath our radical? So if we had something like the square root of 9 squared minus 4 times 2 times 2. Well, I can't take the square root of this, so I need to simplify this first. So I'm going to start. I know that 9 squared is 81. And then if I want to subtract 4 times 2 times 2, I need to multiply first. 4 times 2 is negative 8. Negative 8 times 2 is 16. So this will become 81 minus 16. Okay, then we can subtract those. So that would leave us with 65. So now we started with 9 squared of 9 squared minus 4 times 2 times 2, and we just need to figure out what's the square root of 65. We are going to write this, since it's not a perfect square, we're going to figure out what the decimal would be to the 100th place. So I'm going to take the square root of 65. Okay, maybe. Which would be approximately 8.06. Approximately is when you have the squiggly equal sign instead of just the regular equal sign. That means approximately because we rounded our decimal. Let's do one more example. Sometimes we want to substitute before we can simplify. So if we did something like number 22, we're looking at the expression negative b plus or minus the square root of 16 all over 2 times negative 1. And we want to know what this expression would equal if b was 10. So our first step is to rewrite this with our value for b. It would become negative 10 plus or minus the square root of 16 all over 2 times negative 1. Okay, well now, remember, since it's a fraction, we have to simplify our numerator, and then we can simplify our denominator. Well, I know that the square root of 16 is 4, so this could be rewritten as negative 10 plus or minus 4 over, well, we know that 2 times negative 1 is negative 2. Okay, so we're almost done. Remember, the plus or minus means we have two different options. We could do negative 10 plus 4 divided by negative 2, or we could do negative 10 minus 4 divided by negative 2. Okay, negative 10 plus 4 would leave us with negative 6 divided by negative 2, which means positive 3 is our first answer, and then negative 10 minus 4 is negative 14. Divided by negative 2 leaves us with a positive 7. So 3 and 7 are our answers. So make sure you understand the order of operations. Be a good idea to jot this down as a reminder.